BARK Radio.
What's good, everybody? It's Robo from Allbark back on another video, and today I'm bringing my college football Week 12 picks. We are entering crunch time of the regular season, which is 3 weeks remaining, and college games still starting on Tuesday nights and lasting all week long. Week 12 starts tonight with Maction again, but before we get into those picks, let's go ahead and recap the Week 11 results on the channel. Week 11 was a great one for the picks, especially against the spread, as I went 30, 19, and 2 after a hot start in the weekday slate that continued on throughout Saturday. There were some tough backdoor swings that went against me as well, but I can never complain after a week like that to push the yearly record even further into the green. Hopefully I can continue that again this week looking at the slate. It's a tougher week than last to me, but I like a good amount of my picks again. So with that said, let's dive into Week 12, starting with those Tuesday Maction matchups. The first game of the week Tuesday is Kent State at Akron. Kent State has played a lot better football this year, but this Akron team has looked pretty solid this year in some spots at home, and I think this is another great spot for their offense to play well and control the game. Not only do I think they're the better team here, but the bowl ban clearly has not affected these guys in the middle of to late part of the season. They've been motivated to show up and make something out of the season regardless. The offense just hung 44 on UMass last week, so the momentum is right there as well. So at home, I don't mind backing them to win and cover, 27-20. The second Tuesday matchup should be a really fun one and an absolute toss-up I don't really love picking. Ohio and Western Michigan are pretty similar in power rankings to me. I lean Ohio as a slightly better team on our neutral field, but Western Michigan at home has been very good this season for the most part, and this is a massive game for them as they're towards the top of the conference right now with so much on the line with one loss already. Ohio needs this win to stay alive as well, but any loss hurts Western's chances of a conference title as well. With the way they've looked at home this season, beating Toledo and even taking North Texas to overtime, I lean Western as a slightly better play. Ohio's just not quite the same on the road, so it should be a great game, but I'm going to go with Western close, 28-24. Maction continues Wednesday with Buffalo at Central Michigan. Before the season started, I would have favored Buffalo in this matchup, but they've been truly awful this season compared to expectations. They're coming off maybe their best win of the season, blowing out Bowling Green on the road 28-3, but that Bowling Green team is completely dead, so I cannot really take that as a sign that they can go back-to-back on the road. And despite having zero quarterback play, this Central run game has carried them to a pretty decent season. They're coming off of a close loss on the road to in-state rival Western as well, so they'll more than likely be fired up to get back into the win column, especially knowing one more win is bowl eligibility here in front of their home crowd. So I've got Central here, 30-23. Next up is a disgusting game to both watch and bet on, Northern Illinois at UMass. Northern Illinois might have the worst offense in the entire country, and UMass is the worst team in the entire country. Being a double-digit underdog to a team who flat out cannot score just shows you how bad this UMass team is. They've been worse on the road, but obviously don't have a win at home either, and every match has been extremely ugly besides Buffalo. Northern Illinois has had a little bit of success running the ball, and UMass can't stop anything, so I really don't mind riding Northern Illinois here to wake up and roll over this UMass defense, 24-10. Toledo at Miami, Ohio is another great Maction matchup with some conference title game hopes on the line. Toledo has had some awful turnouts this season, but when they're on, it is blatantly obvious they're the best team in the MAC. And lately, that's exactly what they've looked like, just dominating inferior competition and getting the offense in rhythm, especially with two great receivers in Vander Ross and Rudolph. Miami, Ohio is a good football team with a solid defense, but I really just do not trust Daquan Finn's play this season, and the Toledo secondary is a great unit. I think they're the better team, playing better football right now as well, so give me Toledo, 27-17. Now on to the Thursday game, Troy at Old Dominion. This Old Dominion team has been great this year outside of two horrible defensive performances at Marshall and James Madison. But honestly, a lot of success this year has come in great spots against dead offenses. Not only has Troy been competitive offensively prior to their Arkansas State loss, but this Troy defense is competitive as well. The only bad performance was against Texas State, where they still won with 48 points scored. And coming off of a bye week after a home loss might make this a great spot to back them as double-digit dogs. I think it just could be too much for ODU against a quality opponent here that I don't expect to quit or give in if they're down by a couple scores. So give me Old Dominion by a little over a touchdown, 28-20. We've got two Friday matchups, this one being the good one as Clemson is on the road at Louisville. Obviously, Clemson had a rough year, but now even Louisville has fallen off a bit. After the Miami win, they just looked lackluster to me, and after losing Isaac Brown, they've just lost to Cal at home. That is a really bad loss no matter how you slice it. And to me, Miller Moss just does not look good, and without Brown, the offense doesn't have that spark it needs to score on this Clemson defense. It's a great spot to back him coming off a loss like that, but I just think Clemson is a more talented football team. They just won last week finally after getting robbed against Duke the week prior and absolutely need this game if they want to make a bowl game. So I just can't get there with Louisville after what I saw last week without their star back. I still believe in the talent level of this Clemson team, and I'm going to take them to steal one on the road, 23-20. The second Friday matchup probably won't be a close one as Minnesota heads out to Oregon. Oregon's coming off a super emotional road win over Iowa as Sappington hit a game-winning field goal in Kinnick. So coming back home, you've got to wonder if there will be a bit of a hangover as Minnesota isn't really a team to get excited for as a matchup. However, with that said, I don't really think this Minnesota defense is too bad. Ohio State covered them up, but I think we can all agree this Oregon team just doesn't have the same playmakers as the Buckeyes right now. I really don't think Oregon has looked that great lately outside of the Rutgers beatdown. Defensively, Oregon should shine as I don't see many points here from Minnesota, but I can't really trust this Oregon team to hang 40 plus right now with some guys out, but I just don't see Minnesota as that bad of a team or defense, to be honest. I think it's a decent spot to back Minnesota with a cover, coming off a win that big for Oregon, but obviously Oregon isn't going to drop this one. I'll go 34-13. Indiana is in a bit of a similar boat against Wisconsin after last week's heroics out of both Fernando Mendoza and Omar Cooper Jr. And although Indiana didn't play very well and absolutely deserved to lose that game, all that matters is the win every week, and they continue to get it done. And honestly, I really think that was a perfect spot to bet Penn State against the spread. It was just a huge trap game, as obviously that Penn State team has a ton of talent, especially defensively and within their running game. And the team just seemed to start hitting their stride a little bit beforehand, and that crowd is obviously a major weapon. A win like that can take a lot out of a team, but this Indiana team just seems to be built different. And on the other end of this game, Wisconsin's also coming off of a miraculous win at home over Washington despite the leading passer being their punter. It's a hangover spot for them as well, so Indiana just, to me, absolutely throttles Wisconsin here, 41-7. Texas A&M continues to absolutely roll through their SEC schedule unscathed, and it should continue again this week at home against South Carolina. This A&M team, led by Marcel Reed and some incredible weapons all over the field, looks like a genuine national title threat. And obviously, South Carolina is not a team they're very worried about right now. They've got Samford next week and then Texas on the road in the season finale. So this might even be a potential 2-week look-ahead spot, as that's all that stands in their way of a perfect regular season. Not to mention South Carolina has been pretty competitive in the SEC despite such a bad season at 3-6. They hung around a little bit with Ole Miss on the road last time out, and they had a bye to prepare for this game as well. They kept it close to Bama the week prior, so I don't really see much of a reason they can't cover basically a 3-touchdown spread at A&M. There is some blowout potential here, but 3 scores over a conference opponent that at least has a pulse is not a bit too much for me. I like A&M, but not by that much. I'll go 31-17. Next up looks like a big game, but according to Pitt head coach Pat Narduzzi, isn't one. It's Notre Dame at Pitt. To keep it simple, this is a game Notre Dame absolutely cannot afford to lose, as any loss completely ends their playoff hopes at this point. And on the other end, Narduzzi made it very clear Pitt does not necessarily care if they drop this game, as it's not an ACC game. Obviously, it doesn't mean they're going to lie down and just try to stay healthy throughout a beating, and they're genuinely a good team that can compete here. But the motivation factor is a big thing that they just will not have in this spot. This is potentially a resume-boosting win for Notre Dame, and I think their defense matches up pretty well with Pitt's offense. And the Irish are coming off an absolutely dominant performance against Navy last week. I think the offense could keep that momentum rolling a bit here on the road, and they'll take this one 35-20. Michigan is at Northwestern this week, and technically a neutral site game as they're playing in Wrigley Stadium in Chicago. To be honest, I think Michigan's a much better football team than Northwestern, but at the same time, they are very beat up with injuries on both sides of the ball. They've got 7 or 8 true and redshirt freshmen getting heavy snaps on the offense, a true freshman quarterback going through some growing pains, and a defense that's missing a few key starters and a couple others playing through minor injuries. This just screams low-scoring affair that Northwestern hangs around in with that rushing attack that's looked pretty good lately. Michigan's got a lot on the line and should be able to run on Northwestern in turn, though, so this isn't a loss for them at all to me. But getting near 2 touchdowns on the road is a bit too much for me with how they performed lately and that injury report. I'll take Michigan to get the dub, but by just 10, 24-14. Over to the Big 12, we've got Cincinnati hosting Arizona at noon Eastern. Both of these offenses have looked great this season, but Cincinnati is coming off a much-needed bye after getting clobbered by Utah on the road 2 weeks ago. It was just not their night at all, and that Utah defense suffocated them in the second half. They're getting a pretty solid spot to bounce back here, though, as yes, Arizona's played well and the defensive numbers look good, but the reality is they have not played anyone really besides BYU, who still beat them in Arizona, and I'm not super high on them anyways. I think this Arizona defense has some good corners and can make some stops, but Cincinnati's offense is definitely the best they've faced. Better than BYU's to me, and better than Iowa State's. It's just a great get-right spot at home as well, and I think Cincinnati's defense can be the better unit in this game as well. So give me Cincy by double digits, 34-23. South Florida at Navy gets a little bit of a pause for me right now. I have no real lean at the moment as the Blake Horvath injury news is going to be huge. If he plays, I think that Navy's offense has a genuine shot to compete in this game, maybe even give some upset potential. But as we saw last week after some late news that he'd missed the Notre Dame game, that spread shot up into the 30s and still wasn't even close to a cover. Navy's defense is just not a great unit, and when the offense can't get much going, they just absolutely died in that matchup. South Florida isn't Notre Dame though, and this game is at home, so like I said, if Horvath goes, I think it could be a pretty competitive game. But for now, with his status up in the air, I'm not sure I trust Woodson enough to think he'll be able to keep up with Byron Brown and this South Florida offense that's just incredible. So I'll take the Bulls on the road by 2 scores, 41-27. Over to Kansas State at Oklahoma State. This is going to be another bad-looking Oklahoma State loss. They haven't looked good in basically every game all season long defensively, and Kansas State should move the ball basically at will here. But at the same time, Oklahoma State's been able to score touchdowns this season, except for against Texas Tech, who has an absolutely elite defense. Something Kansas State just does not have. Last time out, Zane Flores had arguably his best performance of the season on the road at Kansas, and the defense honestly didn't do all that bad, giving up just 340 yards to Kansas. They've had a bye before this game as well, so it's been about a month since they've been at home. So I think we see the Cowboys compete a bit here in this game, but ultimately the defense just isn't going to compete well enough to make this one close. I think Kansas State bounces back after their Texas Tech loss and takes this one easily, 38-21. UConn Air Force is going to be an absolute shootout I can't wait to watch. For anyone who doesn't know yet, UConn's offense is one of the best performing groups in the country, and it's led by statistically the best quarterback-wide receiver duo in the nation in Joe Fagnano and Skylar Bell. Bell's on pace for a potential Triple Crown season out wide, and Fagnano has 25 touchdown passes and 0 picks. Now, on the other end of this game, Air Force has an offense that put up some huge numbers. It wasn't great last week, but it was good enough to beat San Jose State on the road, and UConn's defense isn't great either. I think Air Force puts up well over 20 points in this game, but I cannot fade this UConn offense right now. They're even running it well as a compliment, so I'm going to take them here, 42-31. Next, we've got UTSA on the road at Charlotte. Simply put, UTSA's offense should absolutely ball in this game. Charlotte's defense is one of the worst in the entire country. They've gotten absolutely lit up by every good AAC offense, and UTSA's proven to be able to score all year. The run game should have a much better day this week compared to last against South Florida, and obviously Owen McCown's probably going to go back to being unstoppable against garbage secondaries. On the other side of this game, though, Grayson Loftus has been scoring points to the Charlotte offense. They've scored a lot on big plays, hitting the deep ball, and staying competitive offensively because of it. But the reality is, this is a bad football team through and through, and this spread isn't up around the 30s this time. The UTSA team should crush offensively, as everyone else has against this defense, so I don't mind getting just over 3 scores on the road. I'll go 41-20. Over to weekend action, Eastern Michigan's on the road at Ball State. Eastern's offense has looked better lately. They've got some legit playmakers in McMillan and Terry Lockett, and Noah Kim has played pretty good last week at home against Bowling Green, where I absolutely nailed that score on the money. But on the road, Eastern hasn't really looked too great, and this defense still has a serious problem with stopping the run, which is all Ball State does offensively. They've got a pure rushing quarterback in Kyle Kelly that can extend drives with his legs all game, and this Eastern defense is just not overly competitive. I think this Ball State offense has a slightly better day this week after an ugly showing against Kent State last Wednesday. With some extra rest to get back going, and Eastern's got an in-state rival Western coming up, so this may not be the one they really want too bad. So give me Ball State as a home dog, 24-23. LSU is back home this week taking on Arkansas, and at this point in the year, I'm pretty much all the way out on LSU. This is still a winnable game, and the defense is still a good unit, but the offense is just completely inept and couldn't do anything to score against Alabama last week. Nussmeier is benched now. We'll see if that sticks, but this season has just gone completely downhill even after the Kelly firing. Arkansas's offense can score on basically anyone in the country, and I think there's real upset potential here in Baton Rouge. To me, this game goes down to the wire, but at some point that LSU defense has to get rewarded by the offense a bit, and this Razorback defense is just terrible. So I think this is the week LSU gets the win for the first time in a month, 27-24. Oregon State lost at home last week to Sam Houston State, in the worst loss of the season by an absolute mile for this Beavers team. It's not often this team's a favorite, and this was a 3-touchdown type of favorite. That's how bad the Sam Houston team has been, and the Beaver offense was so inept that it flat out lost at home to a winless group of 5 bottom feeder, catching in on basically nothing all first half and giving up some huge plays on special teams to give Sam Houston a lot of belief. And now this week we'll be back making sure that this doesn't happen in back-to-back weeks. Tulsa already beat Oklahoma State this season, and they're getting this Beaver team at home. There's a real shot we see it again, but I gotta believe that what I saw from Oregon State the past 2 to 3 weeks prior was real, and last week was just an abysmal game where they couldn't score despite putting up 450 yards. I'll take Oregon State to survive this one, 28-21. Arizona State hosts a surging West Virginia team this week and does so with a ton of key injuries throughout this roster. Obviously, Sam Levitt's out, Jordan Tyson's banged up, and they're out some stud defenders in the secondary as well. This just doesn't seem like a team with a ton of life left in them with this season basically over at this point. I just don't think they'll be up for this game as West Virginia isn't much of a big game for them. And despite that being true, West Virginia is playing pretty solid football right now as a team. They're coming off back-to-back good performances, a near upset over TCU, road upset over Houston, and then a close cover over Colorado thanks to more great play out of Dior Hubbard in the backfield. Him and Scotty Fox have revitalized this offense, and I don't really see the Sun Devil defense as a great one anymore. I think the Mountaineers continue to compete this week, but just get out-talented eventually by Arizona State on the road, 30-20. Next is Marshall at Georgia State. Marshall has not played the greatest in the past 2 weeks, but they continue to be competitive offensively. That Coastal loss looks rough given the score, but Coastal stepped it up a ton lately, and outside of that game, they hung with James Madison a bit, beat Texas State, and blew out Old Dominion. It's just a good offense with CDRW at quarterback. It's the defense that's the big issue, and Georgia State's offense has scored quite a few points this year. They can run the ball, and Ted Hurst is a monster out wide. I think this is a winnable game for Georgia State. Marshall's looked way better at home this year than on the road. So the upset potential is there, but just given how bad Georgia State is defensively, much worse than Marshall to me this year, I'm going to take Marshall to survive on the road close, 34-28. North Texas is coming off a bye to play at UAB this week after beating Navy by double digits last time out, and Drew Messmaker setting a record the week prior to it with 600 passing yards against Charlotte. This is one of the best offenses of the group of five going up against a defense that, outside of the Memphis fluke, has gotten absolutely destroyed by all of FAU, Army, UConn, and even Rice last week, despite having zero passing ability. North Texas should completely dominate this one from start to finish on one end, and although their defense isn't great, it's still probably able to slow UAB down enough to cover. They couldn't score much on Rice, and I just think North Texas is more talented across the board. I'm going to take them on the road big, 45-21. Missouri State picked up a pretty impressive road win last week at Liberty. I thought that Liberty team was turning a bit of a corner, but this team continues to look motivated and competitive on both sides. UTEP's coming to town this week, and they've looked okay the past few weeks, but there's a clear gap here to me. Missouri State has conference title game to play for, and UTEP's season has already ended with 7 losses. And Missouri State really has one goal here: stop Kenny Odom and Davis, and you win this game with ease. That's been their entire offense this year, basically. Skylar Locklear running around and finding those guys for big plays. If they can limit the big shots, I don't see UTEP hanging around late. So I've got faith in the Bears continuing to succeed in year 1 of the FBS. 24-17 this week. In the Mountain West, New Mexico hosts Colorado State this week. This team is very well coached, as I've mentioned throughout the year. I'm a big Jason Eck fan, and he's continued to succeed in his first year at New Mexico after bringing some of his guys over from Idaho. They're coming off of a bye after beating UNLV on the road, which can help with some of the hangover effect. And the past 2 weeks have been their best of conference play, looking like the same team who beat UCLA earlier this season. But they even competed at Boise State, and Colorado State has been blown out of every game they've been in since their Fresno State win. All of Hawaii, Wyoming, and UNLV have completely stomped on this offense and had big days on the other end. New Mexico can do more of the same, as I like this offense a lot at home. I'll go 35-17. Alabama, Oklahoma should be a banger of a game this week in the SEC. 2 potential playoff teams going at it with a lot on the line. Oklahoma's elite defensive line up against Alabama's offense is the matchup to watch here. The OU defense should honestly get plenty of stops here, but Bama's offense hasn't been overly impressive in these big games, but they've got a lot of clutch factor, and Ty Simpson continues to deal when it matters most. This is the best defense they'll see this year, though, better than the LSU's last week, and John Mateer has struggled a bit since the injury, but he brings a bigger pulse than Nussmeier to me. And having this defense as a back-to-back matchup with the Tigers is pretty tough, so I think this one's another close game for the Tide, but ultimately, they're just the better team and come away with another big win, 24-20. Texas Tech is still a top 5 or 6 team in the country to me and proved it again last week, just dominating BYU. It's an elite team all around that just looks great when healthy every time out. They play UCF this week, who showed me again I was right about this team being overvalued a bit. Connor Wegman played awful and still went on the road and beat this team. Texas Tech is miles better across the board and gets this matchup at home as well. This should be ugly, as I really just don't see a path to points here for UCF outside of once or twice. And although they can compete defensively, this Tech offense is pretty inevitable. Those receivers are not going to be stopped, and this offense should continue to roll this week. I'll go 38-10 for a final. Georgia Tech is back in action this week, still in the playoff race after their loss to NC State. And despite that loss, Haynes King should be talked about more for Heisman. His numbers are absolutely insane this season, absolutely carrying this offense on his back. Georgia Tech's defense isn't good and was a severe problem that NC State game, but Boston College has little to no pulse as a team and program right now. They just got SMU in a hangover spot and got absolutely demolished at home. Plus, this is a get-back spot for the NC State loss after a bye week. Georgia Tech should be motivated to dominate this game and reestablish those playoff hopes. This game really should not be close from the get-go, but Tech's defense has to lock in. I'm going with Tech big, 45-21. Miami hosts NC State this week. NC State has not had a great season record-wise at just 5-4, but the offense has been stellar, and last time out they upset Georgia Tech behind a 48-point performance. And although this defense just cannot stop anyone, this Miami matchup does not really look as bad as it did a few weeks ago. Carson Beck is just not someone I really trust to deliver and bury a quality opponent, and they've got some key guys out around him on offense right now that hasn't helped. Miami took forever to get going against Syracuse last week and needed a very quick run of points to be able to try and cover there before getting the backdoor push. And like I said, this NC State offense is great, and I trust CJ Bailey as one of the better quarterback prospects in the country to score on this Miami defense and hang around. 15 points is just too much for me, so I'll take Miami to win at home, but by a 35-24 final. Iowa at USC looks like a potentially great matchup in the Big Ten, but honestly, it might be a smash spot for USC off an Iowa heartbreaker last week against Oregon. To be honest, this Iowa offense is just not good at all, and USC brings in an element I don't know if they'll be able to stop consistently. Oregon had to deal with poor weather and a slight lack of playmakers to really light up Iowa on the road, but Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane are just ridiculous out wide for USC, and King Miller is lightning in that backfield. Iowa's defense is probably going to have their toughest test of the entire season here on the road, right after getting their hearts broken by Oregon in the final seconds. So for me, this is a game that USC offense eventually handles, 31-20. Virginia started the year as one of my most underrated teams in the country, and then quickly became one of my more overrated teams in the country after getting some ridiculous love in the rankings with how their season started to play out. And while deserved, I think it was clear this team wasn't really a playoff one. And once Chandler Morris went down last week, that game was virtually over, even at home against a very average Wake Forest team. This offense just could not do anything, honestly, and it sounds like he's going to be out again this week. I'm still unsure, but if he's out, I am not a fan of this Virginia team at this price on the road. Duke is still a good team with a very capable offense led by Darian Mensah. So I'll buy the Blue Devils to come home after a tough road loss against a great offense in UConn. The ACC hopes are still alive and well if they win out, so this is a good spot here to get back in the win column, 33-24. James Madison is the cream of the crop in the Sun Belt this season, by far the league's best defense, and an offense that complements it so well. But this week they're going up against a very capable offense in Appalachian State, and App State's getting over 3 touchdowns on the spread, which makes it a pretty tough read. There's, of course, blowout potential as every JMU game has, but 3 touchdowns can definitely be too many points against an App State offense that's pretty much scored all season long, especially with JMU struggling a bit defensively lately, giving up 30 to Texas State and over 400 yards to Marshall last week. This App State defense is garbage, but I could see this being a slower game where JMU tries to escape healthy with playoff hopes in the balance. So I'll take App State to cover, but JMU wins this one, 37-21. Penn State nearly upset Indiana last week as we all saw that game end in incredible fashion. And now they've got to regroup and go on the road against a rival in Michigan State. Penn State might come out completely dead after a game like that in a season like this one. So this is a very scary game to back them as Michigan State consistently treats this game bigger. But this MSU team is a corpse this season. They're on the backup quarterback who actually looked decent against Minnesota. But Penn State just has so much more talent. If they come out trying to win this game, they should blow MSU out of the water, even on the road. This defense just does not get stops against quality offenses, and on offense, there's just not enough consistency to get their playmakers the ball and really threaten this Penn State defense. It depends how they come out, but I like Penn State in this one, 27-17. Staying in the Big Ten, Maryland is at Illinois this week after the bad Rutgers loss, and this Illinois team absolutely smashed Rutgers a few weeks ago at home. This Maryland team is right around that level or worse right now, as the past 4 weeks or so have just been so bad after such a good start. The Terps have had a good offense led by freshman quarterback, but a pretty bad defense that's just too young for conference play, honestly. But I actually think Maryland's offense is not as good as the Rutgers one, who couldn't score at Illinois a couple weeks ago, and the defensive gap isn't wide to think Illinois struggles at all in this game either. I just don't see the path to super competitive game here unless everything turns around at once for Maryland. To me, it seems like Loxley could be on his way out, and the season keeps unraveling. So I'll roll with Illinois here pretty comfortably, 35-17. Western Kentucky gets Middle Tennessee this week, who is just an awful team with a 1-8 record on the season. FIU dropped a 50 bomb on them last week at Middle Tennessee. I think this Western Kentucky offense is one of the best in the Conference USA, so how do they stop this passing attack? Western Kentucky's defense could be a problem, but honestly, who cares about them scoring if they can't get a stop on the other end? Western Kentucky should flirt with 40 to 50 points here at home. They've got title hopes on the line, and I don't see any reason to believe Middle Tennessee's keeping up with that. So I'll take the Tops to roll here, 45-24. San Jose State at Nevada is next. This Nevada team is an absolute corpse. They just gave up 40 plus to Utah State in one of the least competitive games I've seen in a while. That game was over from the jump, and it was a 4-score game before the end of the first quarter. This San Jose State team isn't really that bad and needs a bounce-back win badly after a loss to Air Force where the offense did not show up at all. Something I was pretty surprised to see, as I thought that game would be a lot higher scoring. They're 3-6 now, so every game has to be a win, and Nevada should be a good confidence booster for them. Nobody's covering Danny Scudero in that secondary, and I just can't ride Nevada under basically any circumstance. So San Jose State takes this one by double digits, 35-21. South Alabama at Louisiana Monroe is a pretty ugly Sun Belt matchup. South Alabama's defense has been terrible this season, but they've found ways to score in the majority of their games this year. And this Louisiana Monroe team has absolutely zero offensive pulse, especially through the air as the quarterback play is straight atrocious. This is one of their better spots to put up points this season, but I generally do not see many coming here as it's that bad for them offensively. Any chance to compete here is going to have to come from big broken plays or a huge defensive performance. Both are possible against this South Alabama team, but I just think there's a clear better team here that I'd rather trust on the road with the Jags. So I'm rolling with South Alabama in this spot by double digits, 30-20. Southern Miss at Texas State could be a fun one. Braylon Braxton is so good for Southern Miss, who continues to look like a top 2 team in the Sun Belt. And this Texas State offense continues to keep up offensively with an incredible passing attack. Southern Miss survived a scare from Arkansas State last week, but had that game in hand for the majority of it to me. And that's a good Arkansas State team this season on the road. Southern Miss is just so impressive on both ends, and I have so much faith in this group to continue getting it done. Nearly getting a touchdown could be tricky as Texas State scores so many points, but that defense is pitiful. The last time they won a game was against Nichols in week 4, and they've gone up 40 plus in 4 straight weeks. So give me Southern Miss to continue that, 42-31. Memphis at East Carolina should be a phenomenal game. Not a great game to bet on, honestly, but what a game to watch. Memphis' loss to Tulane last week took them out of the playoff race and likely out of the AAC as well. And Brendan Lewis was clearly reeling in that game with an injury and might be out for this one, or at least hobbled enough for it to matter. I honestly wish ECU was a home dog here, so this is a pretty tough pick. But their defensive line has been very solid this season. So has the secondary for the most part. The offense can light you up through the air with Hauser and his stud receiving core. They're very good at home as well, and like I said, Memphis is now out of the playoff race, whereas ECU has AAC title hopes to play for here. So at home, I think they'll get this one done with just a favorable matchup, 30-27. Next, we'll stay in the American with Tulane hosting FAU. FAU just had a monster offensive day last week, putting up 40 on a decent Tulsa team, but this Tulane defense is very good. Much more talented than Tulsa's to me, despite some poor play in recent weeks. I think that means they're due for a big day after facing UTSA and Memphis back-to-back weeks. The offense is back alive after the UTSA loss, as well as they hung 38 on Memphis last week on the road. But honestly, this FAU offense has been very good in conference play this year. Caden Veltkamp keeps delivering, and Easton Messer has been unguardable, going off again last week. 3 scores may end up being too much here, as FAU has put together a couple backdoor covers against teams like Tulane this year, and it's continued to show up offensively every week. So I'm going to go with a 38-23 final for Tulane on this one. Tennessee gets a tune-up game this week as they take their break from SEC play before they finish the year at Florida and against Vandy. New Mexico State is the opponent this week, and they've been kind of competitive in Conference USA this year. But how does Tennessee not absolutely roll in this game? The New Mexico State offense is struggling to put up points against Kennesaw State and Western Kentucky. There's really no path to touchdowns here at Tennessee, where they're just so outmatched. And on the other end, Tennessee's just vastly more talented at every single position, especially in the trenches. They put up 56 on Kentucky, so this could be 60 plus this week. I'll take a score in the 50s though, because they could rest guys and avoid injury for 2 big games. But like I said, where does the offense come from for the Aggies? Tennessee wins ugly, 52-7. Bill Belichick and North Carolina are on the road this week, looking to stay hot as they take on a Wake Forest team who's coming off a huge road win over the top 15 ranked Virginia. They knocked Chandler Morris out of that game early and dominated defensively, which made another big shakeup in the ACC. At this rate, there might be a world where no ACC team makes the playoff, but regardless, with this matchup, I think we're getting a surging North Carolina team against a Wake team coming off an emotional win. It makes a lot of sense for UNC to make this a close game. The defenses look good. Lopez has found a rhythm. It took 2 late scores from Stanford to cover. So I think this one again is the lowest scoring, and I really don't love this Wake offense either. But I'm going to take them to win again at home this week close, 21-17. We go to another Conference USA toss-up game as FIU takes on Liberty. Keon Jenkins may be out again for FIU, but who knows at this point. FIU does not really say anything about his injury, as he's been questionable and then didn't play last week after suiting up. But the backup looked pretty good against Middle Tennessee as they just hung 50 on them, and Liberty just lost a home game to Missouri State, who I think is right around the same level as FIU. Liberty now has to win 2 of their final 3 games, all tough matchups, just to reach bowl eligibility. I'm not really sure motivation is even there at this point with a 4-5 record. FIU's look good offensively in a lot of spots this year, and they're back home this week with Sam Houston on the schedule, which still makes that 6 wins if they take this one. So I'm going to ride with them in that spot, 27-24. Georgia Southern, Coastal Carolina is another great matchup in the group of 5 this week. Coastal is absolutely surging right now offensively, and Georgia Southern just went on the road and beat App State. Coastal's 5-1 in the Sun Belt now and has some title game hopes, but they're going to need to run the table and beat James Madison in the finale. And this Georgia Southern team has now reestablished their bowl game hopes with a 4-5 record and a tougher but not impossible road ahead with Coastal, ODU, and Marshall as their 3 games remaining. This offense is really not that bad. J.C. French can make plays down the field and with his legs, and O.J. Arnold has been a good complementary back besides him. The defense has been the problem, but they showed up and handled App State last week. Now back at home, I think this is a favorable spot for them, and I think they take this one by a score, 34-27. On to Ole Miss in Florida. This is just a pure case of one team surging and one team having a disaster season. DJ Lagway's been benched now for Florida, and the season's gone from bad to worse, and the offense could not score whatsoever last week against Kentucky, and the defense got absolutely gashed. It was actually the worst they've looked all season to me, and there's absolutely 0 bowl hopes on the table now with 6 losses and this schedule. Not like they'd even care to go to one, but there's really 0 reason to trust Florida to not only score against Ole Miss on the road here, but to get any stops against this offense. Trinidad Chambliss is a legit Heisman candidate, and he's got playmakers for days in this offense, and Lane Kiffin knows how to put that ball in the end zone and bury teams. So give me Ole Miss big, 31-13. Utah at Baylor is a game I'm actually pretty excited to see. Utah enters as near double-digit favorites on the road for good reason, as they've looked electric lately, lighting up Colorado and Cincinnati before the bye last week. But Baylor, on the other hand, rebounded pretty well from their Cincinnati blowout loss. They absolutely demolished UCF and are coming off a bye this week as well. I think they'll be more than geared up for this matchup at home under the lights. They're completely out of Big 12 talks, but this offense is still elite, and Sawyer Robertson's going to find the end zone, even against a stout Utah D. The question is, will their defense be able to slow down Utah at all? Well, the answer is probably no. I think Baylor scores enough to hang around and scare Utah a bit in Waco. It's a solid spot, and I'll take a close outcome, but Utah wins 30-27. Purdue is covered in back-to-back weeks against the Giants in Ohio State and Michigan, and now gets another tough matchup on the road against a Washington team coming off maybe their worst loss in a very long time. I still cannot fathom the fact that they just lost to a Wisconsin team whose leading passer was the punter. That's as ugly as it gets, but Jonah Coleman did leave that game with an injury pretty early, and I think that made a major impact on the offense. If he misses this game, I think Purdue's shown enough competence to hang around at least a little bit, and they can get stops and force turnovers defensively. The offense has scored for most of the year where Brian Brown is healthy, plus I think this Washington team may just be a bit dejected. They're still a much better team here though, so I think they win this one, 31-17. Delaware put together one of the craziest comebacks I've seen this year last week against Louisiana Tech, scoring a touchdown with 30 seconds left and then recovering an onside kick and getting in field goal range to make a game winner as time expired. That was a quality Louisiana Tech team as well, and this week they're on the road against Sam Houston, who I've said all season is one of the worst teams in America, but are now coming off of one of the most absurd results of the year as they beat Oregon State on the road last week after getting dominated in the box score and honestly on film as well. Oregon State kept giving them reasons to believe and choked the game away despite a 350-yard gap. And I think that leads to Sam Houston coming out super hungover in this game, and Delaware is still a much better team to me. They're still an abysmal offense after that win. That didn't change there, so give me Delaware 33-20. Next is another shootout in the Mountain West. It's Utah State on the road against UNLV. UNLV bounced back nicely last week after throttling Colorado State, and Utah State had a similar result against Nevada where they absolutely torched them in the first quarter, leading to a 51-14 win. Both of these offenses can absolutely dominate the scoreboard, and neither defense really leaves much to be desired. So that point total sitting way up at 70 makes perfect sense to me. There's a chance this game goes over that as well if we get to overtime or just a classic shootout. But this is a good enough spot for Utah State's offense to me to think they can hang around and make UNLV sweat. So getting nearly a touchdown is fair value to me, and I think this one goes down to the last possession regardless. I'll take UNLV at home close, 38-34. Ohio State continues to look like the number one team in America. They didn't cover last week against Purdue after allowing a garbage time touchdown on the road, but that doesn't change anything for me. However, this is going to be a bit of a tougher test as they're hosting UCLA. The Bruins started the season horribly, looking like a potential winless team, but then flipped the year around and won 3 straight games before getting curb stomped by Indiana and then dropping a home game to Nebraska last week. They're going to get rolled again here in Columbus, but that point total is a little bit scary to me. I'm actually pretty bought in on Nico Iamaleava as a prospect again. He's looked good and his legs are a weapon, so garbage time points are a real thing here, and Ohio State may be starting to go through the motions as they prepare for Michigan. So I'll trust UCLA to backdoor cover in this one, 41-13. Texas at Georgia is the game of the week. Night games in Sanford Stadium are never fun for road opponents besides Bama, but something tells me Texas is going to compete in this game. Honestly, they've looked the part of a playoff caliber team the past few weeks, absolutely taking it to Vandy early on and making a huge comeback to beat a solid Mississippi State team on the road the week prior. Arch Manning's definitely stepped up his play a little bit, and his weapons have been helping him out a lot. And the defense still remains a very talented group. Georgia just laid the belt on Mississippi State last week, but I still am not completely sold on this offense's ability to score a ton of points in this Texas defense. So getting basically a touchdown here is not bad value for me. I don't think they're going to win, but I expect this to be a very good game, so I'll go with Georgia close and low scoring, 24-21. Next, we'll go to the ACC one final time with Virginia Tech at Florida State. Two teams I absolutely hate picking in this conference. Virginia Tech sits at 3-6, and this is probably their last winnable game left as they finish against Miami and Virginia. And on the other end, Florida State sits at 4-5 after an abysmal ACC season, going 1-5 in conference play. The one win coming at home against Wake Forest where they blew the doors off of them. But this could very well be a similar fate for Virginia Tech, but I just don't see why I should trust this offense at all. They struggled to score against Stanford, and they got demolished by Clemson last week, honestly. I will say they've been much better at home this year, and this is their senior night, so I expect a win out of the Seminoles this week. But I cannot lay 14-plus points with this team, really no matter who they're playing in conference. So I'll go with a 31-21 final. Now to the last SEC matchup of the week. Freshman quarterback Matt Zollers gets a more favorable matchup this week as they host Mississippi State, who despite a 1-5 record in conference has been very competitive this season besides the Georgia loss and can absolutely compete here on the road. They've got bowl game hopes on the line as well as they have to travel to Ole Miss in the finale, so this is obviously the more favorable matchup for them, but the Missouri defense is still a good unit that just ran into a buzzsaw last week with A&M. It's also senior night for Missouri, so I think this is a clear spot they'll show up and help their freshman quarterback out and play a complete game. It's just tough to trust Zollers in this spot as Mississippi State has a lot on the line. I think it's a close one, but Missouri survives 24-20. Kennesaw State at Jacksonville State is a massive game in the Conference USA and one I'm personally staying away from as it's a coin flip to me. Kennesaw has been fantastic this season just running through this conference schedule. They were up pretty big on New Mexico State last week as well and seem to take their foot off the gas to keep guys healthy. And Jacksonville State's won 4 straight and is also undefeated in conference play behind an incredible rushing attack led by Cam Cook and Caden Creel. Head-to-head, I favor Kennesaw slightly, so on the road that makes this a toss-up for me. And honestly, I'm leaning Kennesaw wins this game, but when it comes down to it, I know they can pass the football and get it into playmakers' hands. Jacksonville State is completely one-dimensional. It'll be a sweat no matter what, though. I think Kennesaw wins this one by a field goal, 26-23. Washington State is back from the bye after the ugly Oregon State loss hosting Louisiana Tech this week. A pretty competitive Group of 5 team out of the Conference USA, but not a team that should really strike a ton of fear in Washington State, honestly, considering how the middle of their season looked. Despite that ugly offensive performance against Pac-12 rival Oregon State, they genuinely hung around with Ole Miss and Virginia and then absolutely took Toledo to the woodshed prior. And this bye week was perfectly timed to refocus after that loss and get back to the football they had been playing. Louisiana Tech's season has taken a hit after losing 3 of their last 4 now, including a choke job against Delaware last week. And I just don't think it's going to be a game they win at all. Give me Washington State by double digits, 30-17. TCU at BYU is a great matchup in the Big 12 in the late night slate. It's a TCU bounce back spot for me after a really bad loss to Iowa State. Just so many missed opportunities in that loss last week where they just could have put that game away. So they need this one pretty badly, but they're going into a very tough environment against a BYU team that also wants to get back after getting smashed by Texas Tech last week. The motivation is there for both teams here, and I'm still expecting a good performance from TCU's offense as it's a very talented group. This offense is due for a better start to a game as well. They haven't scored a touchdown in the first quarter in what feels like forever, despite having great numbers. I think BYU got a little bit exposed last week as not as good as their record shows, but it's so hard to win in Provo. So I think BYU escapes 27-24. Boise State got a much-needed bye week last week as they got obliterated by Fresno State at home 2 weeks ago after Maddox Madsen left the game with an injury in the first quarter, and their offense completely died after that. He's out again this week against San Diego State's defense that's just better than Fresno's and is coming off a road loss in Hawaii last week, but they're still alive as it's their first conference loss. That makes this a must-win matchup against Boise as both sit atop the conference with 1 loss, but San Diego State is in a perfect bounce-back position with a defense that can stop the run and not having to worry about that pass game as much without Madsen. San Diego State's also shown a solid offensive pulse with a great coach in Sean Lewis. So I like this spot at home. I'm going to ride with them, 23-17. Our final game of the week is also in the Mountain West with Wyoming heading to Fresno State. Fresno's had a super up and down year. They beat Georgia Southern and Oregon State early on, and then got manhandled by Colorado State and San Diego State. But then went into Boise 2 weeks ago as 3-score underdogs and destroyed them for an outright win after the Madsen injury. It's tough to really tell what this team is, but one thing I know is that this will probably be a defensive battle. Wyoming's offense is just flat out bad, and Caden Anderson has no help around him. But on the other end, Wyoming's defense is very good and can limit Fresno State just like other teams have. I have to pick a side, and I like the way Fresno looked 2 weeks ago, so at home I'm going to trust them here. 24-17. That's it for my Week 12 picks. Let me know your thoughts on any of these games down in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
BARK Radio.